On October 15th, 2011, Philadelphia police faced a crime scene of such horror that it would forever change the blue-collar middle-class community. The overpowering stench that emanated from the basement of an apartment on Longshore Avenue was just one aspect of the horror, but not the reason that initially caught the attention of Tugo Gazlavelli, the landlord. It was the persistent barking of dogs in a building where pets were forbidden. Gazlavelli knocked on the door of the apartment. Linda Ann Weston opened the door and the landlord inquired about the presence of a dog. She denied it flatly, but he was still suspicious. With a polite insistence, he secured her permission to survey the premises. The living quarters offered no clues until he came across a locked basement door. After breaking through the chains that barred entry, Gazlavelli's flashlight unveiled a scene so harrowing it could have been lifted from the most macabre of tales. Amid the overpowering stench, which nearly made him vomit, two small dogs frantically barked from the inside, while human figures lay shrouded beneath filthy blankets on a makeshift wooden platform. A man and a woman huddled together in the gloom, and two more men, one confined in a squalid sleeping bag and the other chained to the boiler like a medieval prisoner. Horrified and propelled by urgency, Gazlavelli called the police. The investigation that followed would unravel a decade-long saga of captivity and abuse, orchestrated by Linda Ann Weston and her accomplices from this den of despair, which would become known as the Philly House of Horrors. This is one of the cruelest cases I have covered. It's shocking and appalling in so many ways, and on top of this, there are a huge amount of victims. A warning to you now, this is a rough one. In some parts of the story, there is not a lot of visual reference, so I have done my best in those parts to give you a visual representation. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that I make videos weekly, so if you want to see my next one, please drop the video a like and subscribe if you are new. It really helps me out. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. Born into a rough environment on October 26, 1959, Linda Ann Weston's early life was marked by hardship and turbulence. Linda would later recount a childhood overshadowed by abuse, mirroring the heinous acts she would eventually commit herself. She was abused by her mother, Alice Weston. She was beat, and so were her siblings, and Linda was even forced to solicit herself when she was only young. Linda also only received a 4th grade education. The passing of her mother in the 1970s cast Linda and her 12 siblings into chaos while still in their formative years. In the wake of this family tragedy, the siblings were divided. Some found refuge with their grandmother, while Linda and others remained under the care of an elder sister. Amidst this familial upheaval, Linda contended with mental health struggles, battling with both depression and schizophrenia. Linda's tyranny over her siblings began swiftly. Her brother's testimony revealed a chilling pattern of abuse. She manipulated her brothers and sisters into incestuous acts for the sake of childbirth. Linda told them that they need to have babies so she can claim more child benefit checks. The siblings who were not being intimate at that time had to watch as the others were. She even threatened to put her youngest brother into the oven if they did not comply. Her reign was ruthless, with regular beatings and using substances to subdue them as and when she seen fit. She forced her siblings into violence against one another and sadistic punishments like consuming cockroaches for minor transgressions. As the years progressed, Linda Weston's siblings slowly left the home that had been the stage of such terror. Yet, the shadow of fear Linda had cast was so profound that none dared to speak of the torment that they had endured. This silence, though not their burden to bear, inadvertently permitted Linda's reign of terror to continue unchecked. Linda Weston's abuse not only scarred her siblings, but also her own daughter, Jean McIntosh. Jean endured similar abuse at Linda's hands, as Linda did to her own mother, and tragically, Jean followed in her mother's malevolent footsteps, mirroring her sinister behaviours. The year 1981 marked a chilling chapter in the family's history. Linda's sister, Venus, became involved with a man called Bernardo Ramos and fell pregnant. Upon questioning the paternity of Venus's child, Ramos became a victim of Linda's wrath. After a vicious beating with a hammer, he was locked into a wardrobe, left without food or water. Linda's brother witnessed the assault, recalling the haunting sounds of Ramos's struggles and cries for help. In secret acts of compassion, the brother attempted to provide Ramos with food, but their efforts led to more cruelty. Linda mercilessly broke Ramos's toes with a hammer, every single one of them. Not long after this, he died from malnutrition in the wardrobe. To try hide the evidence, Linda and Venus transported his dead body to an abandoned house, but it was soon discovered by the police. The subsequent investigation led to their arrests, but justice seemed to falter as Linda received a meagre 8-year sentence for her crimes, of which she only served 4.5 years. Shocking for a crime of such cruelty and brutality. Upon her release, Linda saw an opportunity in the family turmoil when her sister, Vicky, faced the prospect of losing custody of her then 10-year-old daughter, Beatrice. Sensing a financial gain, Linda accompanied Vicky to the court on July 19th, 2002. There, she managed to persuade the court that Beatrice would be in safe hands under her care. In a swift decision, the court awarded custody to Linda without inspecting her home or delving into her more than suspect background. This oversight was catastrophic, considering Linda's history of abuse towards her siblings and her criminal record, which included murder. The Department of Human Services workers, during their visits, noted the setting as secure and stable, marking Beatrice's situation with her aunt as favourable. At this time, Linda had a new partner called Gregory Thomas, who also resided in the household. Despite the addition of new adults in the home, there were no criminal background checks on anyone. In April 2003, full custody of Beatrice was officially granted to Linda. Around the same period, Linda crossed paths with Eddie Wright, who fashioned himself as a street preacher known as Reverend Ed. And there was also a third man on the scene, Nicholas Woodward, She was intimate with all three men. Linda's personal relationships with them hid a sinister plot. Under her leadership, her daughter and the three men began a scheme to exploit mentally disabled individuals. It feels as though she had been building up to this her whole life. Linda Weston preyed on the most vulnerable, methodically targeting individuals with mental disabilities for the sole purpose of exploiting their social security benefits. She ensnared her victims with a litany of false promises, job offers as a babysitter, the prospect of a romantic relationship, and the simple yet powerful lure of companionship. In this callous ploy, Linda capitalized on the needs and trust of those who were simply seeking connection and support, showcasing the depths of her predatory deceit. On June 26, 2005, the group's first victim was Tamara Breeden, a 29-year-old with autism and had the mental capacity of a much younger person. She was not really able to look after herself, nor did she have a good judgment of character. Tamara became ensnared in Linda Weston's web of exploitation due to her inability to independently manage her daily needs. Linda approached Tamara with a seemingly kind offer, a place to stay, in exchange for babysitting services. Tamara's partner, Edwin Santabria, who himself was mentally and physically disabled, joined her in the Weston household. Linda quickly gained control of their social security and disability benefits, cementing her hold over them. She then turned against them. Her boyfriend Gregory was instructed to put locks on every door in the house, transforming rooms into prisons. And now, Tamara and Edwin were confined to the basement, which was only accessible by the person with the key, Linda. They were given a bucket to defecate in, but nothing else. Linda's niece Beatrice was locked in a cupboard in the stairs in the flat above, which was occupied by Linda's daughter, Jean. Beatrice was only taken out of the cupboard to be beaten, which happened to her daily. She was beat with bats, iron pipes, fists, bitten, and had cigarettes put out on her, all over her body. Her face had scars from these atrocities. She was also never allowed to go to school. Beatrice, however, on the rare occasion, was allowed out of her cupboard to go down into the basement where Tamara and Edwin were to clean and empty their bucket. The perpetrators, living comfortably on their stolen funds, indulged in a stark contrast to their captives. They ate well, whilst they sustained their victims on a meagre diet of beans laced with depressants and inexpensive ramen noodles, so that they would be quiet and sleep. When times were hard, their cruelty deepened, forcing the victims to eat their own bodily waste and the waste of the other victims. Their next victim was a woman called Maxine Lee. Maxine was again a woman who had learning disabilities, and Linda manipulated her into a relationship. She started staying over at the house a few times, but very quickly she was in the basement. She was regularly beat by all the men in the house, including some of the other victims, as they were forced to beat her, whilst the other captives would watch on. Like Beatrice, she was beaten with baseball bats, iron pipes, and anything they could get their hands on. Greg would also regularly force himself on Maxine, and then she fell pregnant. I can only assume that Linda adopted the baby for profit, and that it went to live upstairs with her. You would think that with all of this abuse, one of the neighbours might have heard or seen something. Well, they did. Neighbours in West Palm Beach, who lived near the home occupied by Linda Weston and her accomplices, described the living conditions as abhorrent. Recounting their experiences, they spoke of the constant sounds of distress, cries and pleas from a woman's voice refusing to do something. One neighbour, Veronica, initially dismissed the noises as that of misbehaving children. Veronica detailed conversations with Gregory Thomas, who was later apprehended for his role in the crimes. He would seek her out only when Linda was away, expressing a desire to reach out to his family. In a revealing conversation, he admitted that only Linda and her children were permitted to have mobile phones. Veronica also witnessed Gregory's cruel treatment of the mentally disabled adults in the home. On one occasion, she saw him physically assault one of the victims by throwing him onto the floor. Veronica attempted to interact with one of the disabled women, but she was met with silence. She asked Gregory why the woman would not talk to her, and he replied coldly, stating that the captives were forbidden from speaking to anyone. This chilling testimony highlighted the control and isolation imposed on the victims. Donna Spadia, a person with significant mental disabilities and estranged from her friends and family, became an easy target for Linda Weston's manipulative schemes, and she was next to move into the House of Horrors. Exploiting Donna's vulnerability, Linda swiftly began to pocket Donna's disability allowance. Upon realizing Donna wasn't registered for state benefits, Linda cunningly escorted her to the benefits center, feigning assistance in applying for her entitlements, only to deceitfully claim those benefits for herself. Donna endured the same horrific treatment as Linda's other victims: isolation in a laundry room, beatings and starvation. It fell to another captive, Maxine, to aid Donna with basic needs, as she could no longer dress herself or maintain her hygiene. Tragically, Donna passed away alone in the laundry room on June 26, 2005. Linda, unfazed by the death within her house, orchestrated a cover-up. She directed the other captives to transfer Donna's body to a bedroom, where she staged a scene with empty pill containers, suggesting a self-inflicted demise. When officers were finally informed, they suspected that she did this to herself. And just like that, Linda had gotten away with murder. And most likely, this was not the first. During this time, to make extra income with the loss of Donna, both Tamara and Beatrice, who had now turned 18, were forced to solicit themselves in a caravan outside the back of the house. Eventually, Tamara got pregnant, but it was a stillborn, and eventually she became pregnant again, this time giving birth to a girl. Linda took the girl in as her own, and she was known as Little Elle. She was raised by Maxine and lived with her up in the attic, in a cupboard. Unfortunately for Maxine, she was given a beating so severe that she actually fell through the floor. She was not given any medical treatment, not even food or water to help with recovery, and she ended up passing away in 2008. Again, Linda had staged a scene as to not raise suspicion of her death. Derwin McElmere, a 41-year-old man living with cerebral palsy and mental disabilities, was the last individual Linda Weston ensnared before her capture. Noticing his solitary existence during a shopping trip, Linda saw Derwin as an ideal target. Crafting a cunning plan, she visited the shop repeatedly, each time accompanied by Tamara. When they encountered Derwin again, Linda had Tamara feign romantic interest and gave him her mobile number, setting the trap for her malicious scheme. When he called, he was told to come over to the house, and when he did, he was attacked, brutally beaten by the men in the house. He quickly became another victim for Linda. Only this time, it was a little different. Derwin had not given up hope. His will was strong, and he managed to escape. He ran down the road, but unfortunately, this is about as close to freedom as Derwin would get. He was chased down the street by Nicholas Woodward, who held a gun to him and threatened his life if he did not return to the house. And upon returning, Derwin was punished. Linda was furious, and she set the dog on him. It bit him all over his body and also bit off the lower part of his ear. He was then forced to live in a compartment under the stairs, where he was starved and given nothing but a bottle to urinate in. When he defecated, he was forced to eat it, as well as sometimes drinking his own urine. When he was finally taken down to the basement, he was chained to the boiler, where he stayed until his rescue. Philadelphia Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey said, "I have never seen a victim whose injuries were any more severe than what I seen last night with this young woman." The woman he was referring to was Beatrice when she was being rescued. She was found in a cupboard on her own. Her head was in cloth, but her body and face was covered in scars and fresh wounds. She had rags to try and bandage them. She had recently been beaten, and her 2 front teeth were knocked out, and she had been burned and had bones that had healed incorrectly. This was depravity on another level. The 4 victims were liberated from the house of hell. The landlord said they were living in a lightless room with a dirty floor and a bucket for a toilet. He said one man was chained to a boiler pipe. They were tired, beat up looking, thirsty and hungry. They didn't know what world they were living in. Along with the adults being free, a staggering 6 young people who had either been born there or were taken in were rescued. But little Elle was nowhere to be seen. Cheville McGill, a former neighbour of Linda's, shared a tragic story with a Philadelphia newspaper. In 2008, she took care of a young girl whom Linda claimed was her own. Cheville became deeply attached to the child, saying that the girl would cry whenever Linda arrived to take her back. Moved by the child's distress, Cheville offered to adopt her. Linda initially agreed to this arrangement, but before the adoption could be formalized, Linda's daughter, Jean, intervened, removing the girl from Cheville's care, resulting in her or anyone else ever seeing little Elle again. This case is horrific on so many levels, but I think little Elle might be the most tragic thing about it. 50 people are suspected to be victims from this case, as this is how much identification was found at the House of Horrors. Truly shocking. Tamara Breeden was among those captives rescued in 2011. Once free, she was able to attend school and take care of her 3 children, 2 of which were born in captivity. "I feel nice," Tamara said. "I feel happy." She continued, "I kept praying to Jesus and praying to God that I could get back home to my family. I thought I was going to die there. When I seen the other 2 die, I thought it was certain." She kept on whooping me with bars and sticks. I see my scars every day, but I say to God, I'm still beautiful and I'm still alive. Beatrice Weston, Linda's niece, also survived the atrocities. Post-ordeal, she was undergoing therapy, making friends and planning a career. She said, I want to be a nurse. I want to be happy. Linda Weston and her accomplices defrauded an estimated $202,000 before justice caught up with them. On September 9th, 2015, Weston faced the consequences of her heinous actions, pleading guilty to a litany of federal charges that included kidnapping, racketeering, kidnapping resulting in death, trafficking, and theft of government funds. She did, however, say it was because of her upbringing, and she was not fully responsible for her actions, but the judge was having none of it. She received a life sentence and was incarcerated at the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, in Texas. Additionally, the court mandated that Weston pay over $270,000 in restitution. Her daughter, Jean McIntosh, was given 40 years, with Gregory Thomas given 27 years. I am not sure about Nicholas Woodward and Eddie Wright, but they were sentenced, and I can only imagine it would be something similar. The group, under Linda Weston's leadership, had conducted their criminal operations across multiple states, Florida, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Virginia, from 2001 to 2011, frequently relocating to evade law enforcement detection. The victims, although could have escaped many times, were trapped by Linda's violence, both physically and mentally. Fear is extremely controlling, and over time, they must have just lost the will to escape. After enduring such trauma, none of them will ever be the same again, but they are doing a great job at adjusting. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.